Welcome to my review of Have Spacesuit Will Travel by Robert Heinlein. First published in 1958, Have Spacesuit was Heinlein's last young adult book for Scribners. It was followed by Starship Troopers, which marked the end of his relationship with the publisher and the beginning of Heinlein's courting of a more mature audience. I'm sure young adults everywhere wept at the news, disappointed as they undoubtedly were with missing out on the riveting maths lessons that form the bulk of this book. Have Spacesuit Will Travel was nominated for the 1959 Hugo Award, losing out to James Blish's Arithmetic for Dummies. The plot follows Clifford Russell, aka Kip, who wins an old spacesuit in a soap competition and sets about fixing it up. While testing it in his back garden, he is kidnapped by the cronies of the alien scumbag Wormface. He is taken to the moon, where he escapes with fellow captive and human Pee-wee, a 10-year-old girl and super genius. Along for the ride is the Mother Thing, an intergalactic cop of sorts. They are then recaptured, rendering a third of the book pointless. Kip and the others are then imprisoned on a base in Pluto, where it is confirmed that the Wormfaces enjoy eating human soup. The Mother Thing arranges an explosion that kills all the bad guys but one, which Kip disables by stamping on its head. Mother Thing freezes before she can set the beacon to call for help, and Kip completes the mission, suffering serious frostbite in the process. He is taken to the Mother Thing's planet and slowly recovers. Along with Pee-wee, a Neanderthal and a Roman centurion, they are put on trial to determine whether mankind is too violent for the galaxy and should be exterminated. In modern times, it would be probable that a book with this much information about spacesuits and such a long section devoted to soap would be dismissed as a shameless marketing ploy for Michelin soap or YSL spacesuits. However, in 1958 it was far more insidious, existing purely for Heinlein to indulge in his true loves, namely showing everyone how much he knows, complaining about the youth of the day, and boring said youth to sleep with lectures about mathematics. Kip and Pee-wee are both children of super geniuses. Kip's father, though, took him out of the city to keep an eye on his education, and then failed to notice that his small-town school was teaching him sort of useless rubbish such as slogan writing and family politics that form the bulk of the current curriculum. Heinlein can't write for shit, but apparently he had a keen eye for idiots and the damage that they can cause. Early on, this book is almost fun, and not just because it portrays the American future as being rather like 1950s Hill Valley. Kip is fairly affable, an affliction few of Heinlein's protagonists can claim, and his obvious passion for Oscar, his spacesuit, and his regimented approach to winning the soap contest are fun, the pedagogic undertones being far preferable to the usual Heinlein pedagogic overtones. Pee-wee is also okay, some critics are not so keen. Her back and forth with Kip never develops into the antagonism developing to affection that you might expect, it rather just throws a switch. But there are reasons given, and their shared imprisonment on the moon is a bonding exercise, even if it is ultimately little else. There are even a few touches of humour here. Kip's father asks him how he worked out the cube root of 87, and he replies, "You look at the table in the back of the book." The ultimate message of the book is resolutely Heinlein. A man almost always gets what he wants badly enough, and as such Kip is industrious and determined to add to his super smarts. He is undoubtedly the epitome of the Heinlein youth. Heinlein details his efforts to restore the spacesuit at length, but his and Kip's passion for the project actually sell the job effectively, and it feels a bit less heavy-handed than when the same text appeared in the earlier story Misfit. Pee-wee and Kip's trek across the moon's surface, the time pressure applied by their low oxygen supplies, is about as close to exciting as Heinlein ever got. His prose remains pedestrian, and he still lapses into irrelevance more often than he should. But he has two, perhaps three characters by this point that are generating sympathy and concern as intended. That the whole passage, the intended escape from Wormface's ship to the moon base, is rendered moot by the ease of their recapture and immediate removal to the Pluto base is quite disappointing, and it also marks the turning point in the book. It's all down here from here, folks. Firstly, no reason is given for Wormface's layover on the moon, in some respects realistic, as he'd have no reason to divulge information to his prisoners anyway, but the lack of explanation increases the sense that this diversion has no real point. Likewise, the decision of the entire crew to leave the ship and its prisoners who have stolen it once before, entirely unattended, also remains unexplained. On arrival at Pluto, Kip is more or less imprisoned immediately. He remains in the cell largely alone for some time. This section of the book is dull. Heinlein indulges in a description of the spatial distances of various planets and other celestial bodies over several pages and ensures that the readers experience some of Kip's ennui. Here are some of the fun parts. The prizes are distances from the Sun in astronomical units. An AU is the mean distance of Earth from the Sun, 93 million miles. It is easy to remember one figure that everybody knows, and some little figures, than it is to remember figures in millions and billions. I use dollar signs because a figure has more flavour if I think of it as money. Acceleration problems are simple. S equals half at squared. Distance equals half the acceleration times the square of elapsed time. And I'm not going to read out this one. As Heinlein insists, it's as easy as computing sales tax, and every bit as exciting. I'm sure kids in the 1950s were queuing up for the privilege of computing sales tax. Because Kip doubts his numbers, he actually takes 4 goes at this, pausing only to muse, the slide rule is the greatest invention since girls. Kip is imprisoned on Pluto for what feels like a lot more pages than his escape takes place over. After switching on Mother Thing's beacon, they are immediately transported to her planet. Due to his injuries, Kip stays in bed for most of his time there. I do like the concept that communication between species is hindered by a lack of shared knowledge. The aliens can't tell Pee-wee and Kip apart and differentiate him as the monster with the injuries, but the execution, with Kip once again secluded, is mostly wordy and dull. Has he just rounded off 180 million billion miles? By the time Kip has recovered from his injury and Heinlein dispensed with the maths lesson, it is revealed that Kip, Pee-wee, a Roman centurion and a Neanderthal will be put on trial to determine whether we should be exterminated before realizing our potential as a galactic nuisance. By this time you are 95% of the way through the book, so you can simply physically tell Heinlein has left no room to properly develop this idea. These days this is a very familiar trope, perhaps not so much in 1958. What's strange here, especially from someone so keen on mathematics, is that Heinlein's figures make no sense. This is arithmetic we can all do at home. 3 worm faces are apparently a big enough sample to judge their race, but humanity requires 4? Only the Neanderthal's inclusion in the book and the trial is utterly worthless, beyond perhaps point scoring over creationists, as he is immediately dismissed as being from another species. The centurion is a jerk, so they send him away, and Kip is a bit of a dick as well. Alright, take away our star. Go ahead. We'll make a star. Then someday we'll come back and hunt you down. All of you. Yes, that certainly sounds like a good way of convincing someone you're not from a violent species. Eventually it's left to Mother Thing and the very strange intervention of some sort of dancing ape to save mankind. I assume that this was attempted humour, humanity being saved by the performing variety of a lower species. But in the circumstances it was neither well judged or amusing, and turns the book's finale into an unworkable mixture of slapstick and drama. He stared at us and shook his head, then suddenly did a somersault and finished looking at us from between his legs. Even I behaved so at one time. He jumped in the air, landed on his hands, did a flip from that position, yet does anyone deny that I am civilized? The last action of the book is the final nail in its coffin. Kip, confronted once again by the bully and half-wit Ace Quiggle, responds to his bullying with violence. The one thing that Kip learnt from his adventures and the near calamity invited by Earth's violent past is that he should be more violent going forward. Face, have you met Palm? In conclusion, this is one of Heinlein's better efforts. The first act feels well judged and well paced for a young adult novel. The second act is self-contained and may as well be skipped. The third is bogged down by a passive and immobile protagonist and Heinlein's proclivity for a science dump. When Kip says, "I was getting confoundedly tired of being locked up every time I arrived in a new place," you can relate, having literally shared his boredom. Interesting concepts such as the difficulty communicating with alien races or humanity being on trial have been dealt with in more detail and more effectively elsewhere. It's hard to think of a reason for recommending it to anyone beyond the fact that, as mentioned, it is one of Heinlein's better books. However, that's akin to saying intestinal flu is one of the better types of flu. It's just better to take somebody else's word for it than find out for yourself. So I'm not reading any more Heinlein, ever. Hopefully that will give me time to read and review some really great books. If you're not a subscriber who has rung that bell, how will you ever know? Thanks for listening. Goodbye.